Say that most of the organizers of Indonesia Pavilion are climate leaders. I would like to have Pak Rahmat introduce Mr. Gore.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, it is a great honor not to introduce because everybody knows who he is. Just to welcome my friend, our friend, here in this pavilion. I know that we are giving us a great honor because in this pavilion for you is just a side trip. Because I know you've been there for 2,000 people just across the street and you spend time there. Thank you for being here. So our friend Al Gore is, I would say, number one is the inspiration of the world to save the world against the threat of climate change. And it is convenient that we have this inconvenient truth made by you. And as today, you are one of the more tireless voice fighting for climate change awareness and a passionate proponent of the renewable energy. And of course, it doesn't need to be said that Indonesia is happy to have hosted Al Gore in Bali during the time, and even doubly so because when I was there chairing the meeting, he was there and he got the Nobel Prize for it. So I think all that is nothing compared with what you are doing now and in the future. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It really is an honor to visit the Indonesia Pavilion. And I want to thank Dr. Rahmat Witular, who is your President's Special Envoy on Climate Change and who was the chairman of the Conference of the Parties in Bali. And I would like to acknowledge his wife, who is also here, who I know from Bali. And indeed, it was quite an experience to fly, connecting flights all the way from Oslo to Bali. And it was so important, the work that you did there. And I want to especially thank Amanda Katili Nyode, who is the manager of the Climate Reality Project in Indonesia. Our President and CEO, Ken Berlin, is here in the front row. And Amanda has been one of the most effective and certainly the hardest working manager for climate reality in countries around the world. I certainly appreciate that. We had a wonderful 3-day training in Jakarta, and then I was so impressed, Amanda, that in almost every subsequent training, no matter where it was in the world, there were Indonesians who came to the training. I wonder, we are here all the way in Paris, which is a long way from Indonesia, but I would like to see a show of hands. How many climate leaders are here in this group? Wow, look at all those hands, and all the hands in back. Also, thank you very much for what you are doing. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Agus Justianto, Senior Advisor to the Minister. Thank you very much, Doctor. And I'm glad we have a standing room only here in the pavilion. I'm honored that you would invite me to speak. And I just made a speech, and I feel like I should not repeat myself. But I will simply say that we really have only 3 questions to answer now about the climate crisis. The first one is, do we really have to change? And of course, the scientists have long since told us yes, but now Mother Nature is telling us, yes, we have to change, and the voice from nature is much more powerful than the voice of the scientific community. And in every part of the world, the people in all walks of life are noticing, and how could they not notice, that the world they grew up in and the world described to them by their parents and grandparents is now very different compared to what it was decades ago, or even a few years ago. And of course the issues of continuing to rely on fossil fuels and the land use issues, and including the unsustainable conversion of peat forests to these palm plantations, really these changes have to be made. And I'm grateful that we are now seeing, partly due to the leadership here and the work of the climate leaders and so many of you, we are seeing Indonesian business leaders and civil society leaders helping to bring about the beginnings of very meaningful change in the sustainable management of natural resources, and I thank you for that. But we do see in these extreme weather events and the fires and the smoke that shuts down airports and affects neighboring countries, we do see the answer to the question, yes, we really must change. So the answer to that first question, must we change, is very, very clear now. Just as importantly, the second question is, can we change? And fortunately, the development of new forms of affordable solar electricity and wind power and battery storage and efficiency improvements, and not only sustainable forestry but sustainable agriculture and sustainable fisheries, we now have the ability available to us to bring about the changes that are necessary. And the third and final question after must we change and can we change is, will we change? And of course that's the answer to that question is up to us. And the answer, I predict, will come very loudly and clearly at the end of this week from here in Paris, partly because of the Indonesians. I want to encourage those of you who are in the negotiations to make sure that there are no impasses, to make sure that the language that results is as strong and effective as we all know it has to be. So I'm counting on you. I will close as I began with an expression of thanks to each and every one of you for the work you're doing. A word of personal thanks for your generosity in inviting me to come here and the warmth with which you have welcomed me. And I will remind you in closing of a very powerful truth that I have learned is very true. And that is, for any who doubt that our world has the political will to make these changes, we must always remember that political will is itself a renewable resource. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gore. Yeah, Mr. Gore could take one or two questions. Please, short questions or comments. Anybody? Yes, sir.
Mr. Gore, how do you think the world community as itself can best cooperate on climate change? Should we focus on ambitious goals or focus more on things that we can all agree to?
We should all agree to ambitious goals. I think I got the answer right on that one.
Yes, please.
Hi, well, I'm come from Cuba, the island.
Mucho gusto.
Yeah. Gracias. It's the fair question. It's global. How do you think that should to take the global economy in order to really protect the economy, and in the topic mainly on the consumption, how should change are we like consumers in order to really protect the environment? And second, when you will go to Cuba? We need you now in Cuba.
Gracias.
We are inviting you officially.
Thank you very much. Is that the official invitation right there?
From our NGO here. We are from an NGO.
Gracias. I would love to visit Cuba. I don't have plans at present to come, but perhaps we could do a climate reality training in Cuba at some point in the future. In answer to your questions, the economy is the environment, and the environment is the economy. I don't mean to sound like a philosopher, but really it's true that if we do not protect our environment, the economy will suffer a great deal. And if we do not make the transition to sustainable capitalism and to renewable energy and forestry and farming and fishing, then the economic consequences can be quite severe. Investors should understand this as well, because you may have heard of the subprime mortgage problem in the U.S. That's because the value of those subprime mortgages was a fantasy. The people who were given the mortgages couldn't pay the monthly payments. Well, the carbon assets are also subprime and are in danger of being stranded. By that I mean we can't burn all the carbon that has already been discovered. And those who've invested in that are at risk of seeing their investments disappear as the subprime mortgage investments disappear. Secondly, in order to produce a healthier economy, we have to find ways to create a lot more jobs in the world. There are many new forces in the global economy, which you've seen in Indonesia, which we've seen in the U.S., and many countries are experiencing, where the new forms of automation that include artificial intelligence are actually making some of the jobs that paid good incomes in the past less available. And so we need new jobs for people that pay good wages. And we need a global project that will put tens of millions of people to work. Well, I have such a global project. We need to retrofit buildings to make them more efficient and to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases. We need to replace the windows with better windows. We need to replace the lights with LEDs. We need to have better insulation. We need to plant more trees. We need to make our farms sustainable. And we need to convert forests and fisheries to a sustainable model. We need to install solar panels. We need to build windmills. All of these changes that are necessary for the survival of our civilization are changes that will put tens of millions of people to work. That's the answer to improving the economy. So the answer to the climate crisis is also the answer to how we stimulate more jobs and lift the prospects for prosperity in the future.
One last question for gender balance. Our young climate leader from Indonesia.
Hi, my name is Mia. I'm a climate leader from Indonesia. I'm 20 years old. So on behalf of all young generations, I would like to ask you a question. In your own opinion, what do you think, and how the young generation could contribute to tackle climate change? And what can you say to them for those young generation who already care about climate change to stay being motivated? Thank you.
That's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. I have said in the past, and most recently in my speech a little while ago, that this is a great moral challenge that we must confront successfully. And I have referred to the previous struggles for advances in great moral causes, like the abolition of slavery, like the struggle to bring gender equity and equality and voting rights for women, like the effort to establish civil rights and abolish discrimination on the basis of gender or orientation or religion, and the struggle against apartheid. And every time we have had such a struggle, young people have played the key role. Young people have always had more energy and have often had a clearer vision of what is right and what is wrong compared to older people who have grown up with the legacy ways of thinking and sometimes find it a little harder to get rid of the old ways of thinking and open their eyes to see that a new day is dawning. In the civil rights movement in my country, I remember when I was a very young boy, I was moved by the young people who were challenging their parents and saying, how could you allow the law to discriminate on the basis of skin color or ethnicity? And some of the older people who had grown up with that old way of thinking were challenged to change their thinking. But the young people, for them it was very clear. And they just said, come on, let's change. And this is an issue that is very similar because, as you know yourself, young people your age are far more active and already thoroughly convinced that it's immoral to use the atmosphere as an open sewer and to ignore the warnings of the scientists and to ignore the warnings of Mother Nature. I will use one other example about the special qualities of young people when it comes to meeting a big challenge. When I was 13 years old, I remember vividly hearing the president of my country in that year, President John F. Kennedy, issue a challenge to put a person on the moon within 10 years and bring him back safely. And I remember hearing some adults at that time say, that's going to be a big waste of money. We've never done that. It may be impossible. Why on earth should we look at something like that when we have so many other things that are important to spend money on here in our own country and on our own planet? But young people were inspired. The older people who said it's impossible to put a person on the moon in 10 years were surprised when 8 years and 2 months later, Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. And the moment he did so, in Houston, Texas, at NASA's Mission Control, there was a great cheer that went up. If you look at the systems engineers cheering in that room that day, their average age was 26, which means, among other things, that their average age when they heard that challenge was 18. They decided to be inspired. They decided to study hard in school and acquire skills that would enable them to be a part of succeeding in that challenge that inspired them. And in the same way, I have met young people in Indonesia, 18 years old, 20 years old, 23 years old, who have decided to change their lives and learn what they need to learn in order to help solve the climate crisis. It is a moral challenge. Ultimately, it's not a political issue. It's not even an economic issue, although there are political and economic challenges. But it's really a moral issue. It is a choice between right and wrong, just as the struggle to abolish slavery and equal rights to vote for women and civil rights. Each of those ultimately became a choice between what is right and what is wrong. And so when young people grasp the essential truth of what is at stake, they can use what Mahatma Gandhi described as satyagraha, which I'm told means truth force, and they can confront those around them with the force of truth by asking the question, as only young people can: why is it okay to discriminate on the basis of skin color? Why is it acceptable to use the atmosphere as an open sewer and condemn future generations to a life of progressive degradation and suffering? And when the question is clarified by young people and backed up by their energy and activism, then things begin to change. So thank you for going through the climate leadership training. Thanks to all of those who have done so. Thanks to all of you who in various ways are part of this great moral movement to solve the climate crisis. And when the story of these days is written, I hope that right at the top of the story, part of the history will be Indonesia helped lead the way to save the future of the earth. Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gore. Thank you, the Climate Reality Project team. Thank you, Kimberly.